Okay, so today we're going to talk about rocks. So we've been talking about minerals. Now we're going to talk about the other side where we have a combination of minerals, rocks. And before we get started, remember, pause me whenever you need to. Make sure you write down all highlighted vocabulary. So we need to talk about how geologists classify rocks. And they do that by their mineral composition and their color, for the most part. Rocks are made of mixtures of minerals and other materials, and they're called rock-forming minerals, or the minerals that make up most of the Earth's crust. So we're talking about quartz, silica, you have some granite in there, you have some basalt in there. Granite and basalt are both rocks. Granite's light-colored, and basalt's dark-colored. And we're going to talk about those a little bit more in a second. So the first way they use is their texture. And most rocks are made up of particles or minerals that geologists call grains. The texture is basically the look and feel of a rock surface. Does it feel smooth? Does it feel rough? And they use the terms based on size and shape and patterns. So size can be fine-grained versus coarse-grained. Shape can be rounded versus jagged. And they can be banded versus non-banded. And in a second, we're going to look at what those look like. So, and then the origin is how the rock forms. So did it form by cooling magma? Did it form from pressure? Or did it form from a combination of the two? So here we have coarse grains. So you can see the grains in it. These are both granite, by the way. You can see the grains in this set of granite, but you can't really see them here. And I know the picture is not great, but here's a bit of a different diagram of it. This is what the grains look like in this rock, and this is what the grains look like in there. Then we have rounded versus jagged shape. And we have conglomerate here, which has kind of a round, they're all kind of round, and it looks like it's circular, have spheres or little rocks. And this one's jagged, so it looks like it's pointy. And then we have banded versus non-banded. So I showed you a banded rock in class today, or last week if you were watching. It kind of looked like this. And then, so this is banded, and this is non-banded. So a rock's origin is the way that the rock formed. And there are three major groups, which I'm sure you've heard of. We have igneous rock, which is formed by cooling of magma or lava, which is here. We have sedimentary rock, which is formed by compression of sediment or animal parts. And then we have metamorphic, which is changed by heat and pressure. And the fun fact is it has to start as igneous or sedimentary to become metamorphic. So igneous rocks either form above or below the surface of the earth. And when they form below, it's called an intrusive rock. When they form above, it's called an extrusive rock. The grain of the rock, which we just talked about, will be based on how quickly the rock cools. So if it cools slowly, you're going to have larger, coarser grains like we see in the granite. And if it cools quickly, you're going to have smaller, finer grains like we saw in the other granite or we see in basalt. Sedimentary rocks are formed through the process of weathering, erosion, deposition, compaction, and cementation. We talked about these a little bit when we talked about beach erosion. And there are three major types. There are clastic rock, which where they're squeezed together, organic rock, which is basically animal remains or plant remains, and chemical rock, which when minerals dissolve in the solution and make crystals. And later on this week, we are probably going to do a chemical sedimentary rock when we make the crystals. Then finally we have metamorphic rock. So metamorphic rock forms when other rocks are changed by heat, pressure, or both. And they're either foliated or non-foliated. And that's basically their layers. So if they're foliated, they have thin, flat layers. And if they're non-foliated, then the minerals in the rock are arranged randomly. And I'll show you what that looked like as we get further down the line. Then we have the rock cycle. And all I want you to do for this slide is just kind of copy down the diagram. We're going to talk about this in class in detail later this week. But for right now, just copy this down. And once you have that down, we're all set.